In this video I'm going to show you some of my cast iron pots and pans while I'm out here by my little cast iron stove that's heating the woods actually right now, I guess. Just sort of testing that thing out. I'm going to build a little hut for it so that it'll be protected in the winter time. And also over here I got my tree that it just got cut down. But I showed you that on a previous video where I was showing you the process of how to clean cast iron a little bit. I want to show you my oldest pan here. This one has what's called the gate mark on the underside. These guys I guess were made back in the late 1800s, most definitely, very likely before 1890. This one's kind of cool in that it's got a different kind of pour spout than I've seen on any of the other pans I've ever had. This one, the inside looks like this. It looks like it's almost laid in there somehow rather than molded, but I guess that shit's molded because it's got that gate mark. It also has this interesting handle, whereas normally on a handle there's usually an indented number. This one looks like it was almost hand tooled that way. Also, like you can see in here, there's crud. Now maybe somebody knows otherwise. Maybe this was some sort of a flaw in the mold or something that created this. I'm not sure. Feel free to write in the comments section down in the bottom of this video if you happen to know. Also up here, I don't know if you can see this very well. I guess you can see it pretty good. See that how they didn't finish tooling the inside of that handle. It's got like crustified metal there. So once again, like this is my oldest pan. Now let me show you the inside. This is like very, very smooth. And this is one of the things I'm really going to emphasize in this video here, is like how they work the inside of different pans throughout the years. So once again, this is the oldest skillet that I have. This is the oldest bowl that I have. In fact, this is the only bowl that I have. It's called a Scotch bowl. It's missing the ring right here, but this thing is also very old. Griswold the company started off using, I think also the name Victor, and maybe then Erie. They started using that before they started using their name Griswold. Now this one has a patent of March 10th, 1891. So obviously this is pretty old too. I'm not going to own this for very long because I'm going to sell it on eBay. So I want to make a video before I did that. Here's one that was also pretty rusty and crusty. This is the oldest Griswold pan that I have. Between like I think 1909 and 1920 something, they had this slant logo. This is called an EPU also because it says Erie, Pennsylvania, EPU. And this is a number 8 pan, which is pretty common. But see once again how it's indented there, that number. And look at this one. Now these guys were by far the absolute most, well, I don't know so much about the Erie pans. Actually, I got another pan that looks very much like an Erie that I'm going to show you next. This one's very, very smooth on both the back side and the inside. Now, if you know the process of seasoning these things, this is the hardest one I've ever dealt with, the season. And the best example I have to give as far as why that is, I mean, this surface is almost like glass. And if you can imagine trying to season glass, you know, it would be pretty tough. But these ones, there's a process, and maybe I'll make a video about just seasoning at some point. But once again, this is my oldest Griswold that I own at this time. Also going to sell this one on eBay. This is my Erie Look-Alike Pan. Once again, check out the inside of this thing. Smooth as silk. Now it doesn't look super smooth because it's actually got a little teeny bit of flash rust on it, which is what you end up with after the cleaning process. Just before you season it, you use a Brillo pad or an SOS pad to wash that off in a sink of hot water, and then there's a few other steps that go along with that seasoning deal. But when I cleaned this guy up, I was kind of disappointed to not see the Erie logo, you know, underneath the crud that came off. I did get a number 7 though. But for those of you that are familiar with Erie skillets, doesn't that thing look like one? And even the handle. The next logo for the Griswold company came in about 1929. This is between 1929 and 1940. This is called the block lettering. This is a little number 3 skillet. Once again, very, very shiny inside. These are a dream to season. I mean, these things soak in the oil when you first do it, whereas the other one that I was telling was like seasoning on glass. Those kind, you got to make sure those things are totally dry. In fact, it's a good idea to make sure any pan that you do is totally dry. And I say that because it's not really dry. It looks dry. You want to wipe off all the shininess. Resist the temptation of sticking it in the oven because it looks nice and shiny. You don't want that. It'll puddle up, it'll run down, it'll look like that crud that's on the side of your cookie sheets, you know. It'll just have an uneven nastiness to it. But these things here, the way that they were made, a little more porous, I guess, than the other pans. Now here's an example of like maybe over seasoning. I don't know if you can see this or not, but in there's like freckles. Now if I was really particular about this, wanted to get it perfect, I'd tear it down to bare metal and start over again. But it's alright, I can live with it. I don't know if you can even see that anyway. Probably see more of the spots that are on my lens than you see the spots that are in the pan. But it's just not a grand seasoning job. Now this one, on the other hand, worked out pretty good for me because I did my method of making sure it was very, very dry before sticking it in the oven to season. See, the reason why it looks shiny now is because I always put a light coat of oil over my pans as I store them. That's a good thing to do, as it'll avoid, you know, moisture. It's also a bad thing to do because, like, my dog is gated in at night in a portion of our kitchen that's next to where some forced air is blown, and the dumb dog sheds, and nastily there's dog hair on this thing. It's either the dog's going to go or my pan's got to move to a different spot, you know, once winter time really kicks in here. But the pans face the wall, you know, so it's just dog hair on the outside. Those are the only Griswold pans that I have at this present time, with the exception of this one. I mean, I should say those are the only Griswolds that I have that have actually the name Griswold on them. Now, this is a unique and interesting little pan that I found out is also a Griswold. You can tell by this handle right here, and the shape of that thing. This is called a Griswold Ironmountain. But oddly, they don't put their name on it. This is a number 5, and I really like cooking with this one. Also has a very nice shiny inside. From what I understand, I think these were early 40s. Now, if you have Lodge pans, they still make Lodge pans. They sell them at Cracker Barrel. They sell them at grocery stores and Target and different places. This is an old Lodge pan. It doesn't have the name on it, as they didn't back in the day, but you can tell them by the 3 notches. That's how you can tell an old Lodge pan. Also very smooth on the inside. I'm going to show you some differences with that inside look in just a moment. During the time of Griswold's existence, they had one major competitor, and that was Wagner ware. A lot of people see Sydney and they think Sydney, Australia, but it actually is Sydney, Ohio. That's why it has an O in there, I guess. This is also a nice pan I like very much. You get an old Wagner ware, they're nice pans. But in the 1950s, Wagner purchased Griswold when Griswold went under, and they started making junk. In fact, there was a lot of junk, I guess, being made. You figure a lot of the foundries were up against, you know, all these different companies making their own pans and different things, and of course in the 70s old Teflon came along and everything else that really beat down cast iron. Cast iron is now making a comeback, and there's a lot of interesting things that you discover when you come into the knowledge of cast iron, which I'm passing along to you now. When Wagner bought Griswold, I guess they were making the junkiest pans of them all. You know, actually I got one more Griswold I got to show you. It was a small logo type, and I'll show you that in a moment. But to finish this deal about Wagner and Griswold, this was during that point in time. Look how goofy and different the Wagner logo looks by comparison to that one. See? A lot rinky-dinkier and cheaper, and look at that surface on that thing. This was probably in the 1950s where they also started putting made in the USA on them, because pans were being made in a number of other places, I guess, and the United States was competing with different places. I'll show you some pans from different places coming up in a moment also. But look at the inside of this thing. Boy, that thing is pebbly as can be. And that's kind of how they're made now, even by the Lodge company. I'll show you a Lodge coming up in just a minute, but just look at how bad this one is. Really bad. It's like bumpy as all get out. Now, before Griswold actually went out of business, they started making these small logo types. You may look the same size as the other one I showed you, but when I pull it back and you see the size of this pan, you recognize how small that is. Now, they also started making pans with cheaper metal. That's why this thing is all pitted. I mean, if you see some of my, in the last video, pictures, or my other video, the one where I showed a little bit of the cleaning process, you'll see some pictures in that video of some of the pans that I had and what they look like to start with. Well, you saw it kind of with the one in this video of the Erie pot, although that was mostly burnt on crustiness. This one had burnt on crustiness but also rust, and when I cleaned it off, this was what was left on the back side of the pan. Now, the inside of the pan is all pretty good and pretty clean and pretty smooth, but the difference in the type of metal that was used causes these to pit just a little bit inside, whereas those older ones, they like basically never pit. I mean, you really have to abuse those things in order to get pits, and like that first Griswold I showed you with the slant logo. This one here, you'll also see in where I clean it down to bare metal, you can see some of the scratches in the metal. But as long as you don't really work it over, those things will eventually just smooth over with seasoning. These things are also very porous. They suck in the oil pretty well, but maybe more so than the generation before that had the block logo type that I like seasoning the best. But I just wanted to show you that pan because that's a small logo Griswold. Now to some really rough ones. This is a present day Lodge pan. This is the kind like I was mentioning that you could buy at Target. They have their own brand, well, it's their own version at Cracker Barrel that has the Cracker Barrel logo on the back. It's made by Lodge. The inside of these pans are also very bumpy. The reason why is because they just don't tool them out like they used to. Back in the old days, they'd clean them out, make them smooth as glass, as I've already shown you. Nowadays, they just put them in the mold, they crank them out, they season them for you. So when you buy a Lodge pan that's already seasoned, which is pretty good, just make sure you learn the process of not washing the thing in soap, and especially don't leave it air dry. By any means, you don't want to let it air dry. You want to dry the sucker out as soon as possible. Now, to end the video, let me show you what's gone on in the past as well with some of these less desirable types. Now, at some point, Korea made their own pots. That's probably why in the United States they started having it designated, made in the USA. This thing says classic on it. Oops, that way it does. And, I guess they're just trying to emulate, come back into the cast iron market for folks that, weren't getting it anymore, whatever, I don't know. But nonetheless, made in Korea. I would dare say this is pretty cheap metal. And if I cleaned it down too much, I'd end up with something like this. This one here was made in Taiwan. You do not want to buy or use one made in Taiwan. These things, usually people will complain that when they go to clean them out, they get blackness on their cloths and all. The reason why this thing is like coated with something or other, it's like a fake metal. This part, when you get down underneath that coating, it's like creek clay. This stuff was junk. I soaked this thing initially. It looked pretty much like this in apple cider vinegar. I did it a few more times to try to clean it up a little more. It just continued to deteriorate, and it was actually puddling up like mud when I was scrubbing this out. Do not use one from Taiwan. You might get it, paint a little picture on the back, that'd be fine. I'm guessing, like I say, that this one from Korea is about the same. Also got a pebbly inside. Be interesting to know when this thing was made because, of course, we were in war in Korea back in the 50s. So I just don't know when these things were made. But I thank you for watching this video that I made just now. And let me just tell you real quickly that you can know that you have a home in heaven. It's already been taken care of for you. Jesus Christ paid the way for you to get there. And it's not through works of righteousness which we have done, but by His mercy He has saved us. And through His work. Jesus said when He died on the cross, or when His body, His flesh died, He said, "It is finished." That means His work was accomplished. He had completed the law that we cannot attain salvation through the law. It's there as our schoolmaster to show us that we're sinners. you recognize the fact that you're a sinner, God can work with you. I've got other videos on this channel that explain more, so maybe you can watch some of those along with my other video about cast iron. Thank you for watching this one.